Dante, the story of his life. This is a biography praised as the closest to the real Dante. Why has it sparked heated discussion at the same time among academics and ordinary readers? This book, Dante, the story of his life, was written by the renowned Italian Dante scholar Marco Santagata. Unlike traditional hagiographic biographies that portray the poet as a larger-than-life, otherworldly prophet untouched by earthly concerns, Santagata places him firmly back into the streets and alleys of 13th century Florence, surrounded by political intrigue, family feuds, and the raw struggles of everyday life. When you finish reading this book, you will realize that the magnificent literary edifice of the Divine Comedy was built brick by brick out of the blood and terrors of exile, the humiliation of factional strife, and the shattering of ideals. Chapter 1. Childhood and the First Marks of Fate 1 to 651 to 83. Dante was born in 1265 in Florence into a declining noble family. The year of his birth was considered astrologically significant. He later repeatedly emphasized being born under Gemini, as if even his birth carried a prophetic shadow. His father, Alighiero, was a small-scale moneylender and minor landowner. The family was not wealthy, but belonged to the ancient old citizen class, which made Dante both proud and sensitive about his noble status from childhood. In the 13th century, Florence was in a phase of rapid expansion. The city's population surged, and banking and wool trade turned it into one of the richest city-states in Europe. But growing wealth also brought violent social divisions. New rich families, old nobility, bankers, craftsmen, Guelphs, and Ghibellines, the conflicts were like a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. The most direct sign of this division was the street fighting and assassinations that happened constantly. Florence was full of tall family towers. Each tower represented a clan's power base. Towers were often connected by wooden bridges or rope, so armed men could move quickly during clashes. As a child, Dante frequently heard the clash of metal outside his window or saw blood-stained bodies being hurriedly carried away. From early on, he understood that power was never won through humility or morality, but through swords, money bags, and alliances. This environment shaped his deep skepticism about human nature. It also led him to design hell in the Divine Comedy with such cruel and vivid realism because he had already seen what real hell looked like as a boy. He once personally witnessed a neighboring family over a small debt dispute hire mercenaries who threw their enemies off a tower at midnight. The bodies hit the stone pavement with a dull thud. At that moment, young Dante hid behind the curtain and for the first time realized, in this city, morality and justice were often just consolation for the weak. The real rules were written on the edge of a blade and in the shine of gold coins. This precocious realization pierced his soul like a thorn. Later, echoes of these childhood bloody scenes can be faintly seen in every circle of punishment in hell. Dante spent his childhood in this atmosphere full of tension. The most important event of his childhood happened in the spring, and he was 9 years old. On the 1st of May, During a grand festival procession in the streets of Florence, 9-year-old Dante saw 8-year-old Beatrice Portinari for the first time. She wore a pure white dress and appeared in the crowd like a sudden beam of light breaking into a dark alley. Dante later wrote in La Vita Nuova that in that instant his heart felt pierced by an arrow and could never be at peace again. He repeatedly portrayed this encounter as the beginning of destiny, but Santagata reminds us this was largely a literary reconstruction made in adulthood. In reality, Beatrice was just one of many neighborhood girls. Dante's feelings for her probably only truly deepened many years later. Through archival research, Santagata shows that the Portinari family were rising bankers, higher in status than Dante's family. A 9-year-old meeting an 8-year-old girl was not unusual, at the time likely just a polite family visit. Dante made this encounter sacred in his writing because he needed an absolutely pure symbol to stand against all the filth and betrayal that would flood his later life. Family life during this period was unhappy for Dante. His father died early, his mother remarried. He was raised by his sister and stepfather, and life was unstable. Santagata's research suggests Dante probably suffered from some form of neurological condition, possibly epilepsy, which made him especially sensitive to violent bodily reactions. This physical vulnerability caused him deep anxiety about self-control. He often woke at night from sudden convulsions or palpitations, while his family could do nothing. At that time, medicine attributed such symptoms to demonic possession or imbalance of humors. Dante's family refused to admit it publicly and only secretly hired wandering doctors that treat him with herbs and bloodletting. These experiences gave him a deep interest in the relationship between body and soul. They also provided the most direct inspiration for the scenes in the Divine Comedy where souls are tormented through their bodies. The sinners he describes wrapped in snakes, burned by fire, frozen, and I carry the projected fear he felt as a child when his own body was out of control. He later transformed this sensitivity into extreme descriptions of love. In La Vita Nuova, he describes trembling all over, turning pale, almost fainting when he saw Beatrice. He turned these physiological reactions into poetry and created the prototype of the sickness of love. Dante was not born a bookish nerd. He received the standard education of noble sons at the time: Latin, French, rhetoric, arithmetic, fencing, and writing. He loved poetry, especially the elegant love poetry of the Sicilian school. Around age 13, he began writing poems, imitating the style of Guido Cavalcanti. Cavalcanti was Florence's most outstanding poet, more than 10 years older than Dante. Later, he became both friend and rival. The two often discussed philosophy, love, and politics together, laying the foundation for Dante's early poetic views. Santagata notes that Dante's early poems already showed his distinctive temperament. Unlike other poets who lingered on physical beauty, he elevated love into a form of spiritual purification. In one early sonnet he wrote that true love is the hunger of the soul, not the satisfaction of the senses. This idea later became the core principle of the Dolce Stil Novo school and planted the seed for Beatrice's image in the Divine Comedy. Chapter 2: The Awakening of the Young Poet and Multiple Identities, 1283 to 1295. In 1283, at 18, Dante saw Beatrice again. This encounter plunged him into intense, unrequited love. He began writing poems frantically in praise of her, yet never dared confess. Beatrice died in June 90 at only 24 years old. Dante was devastated and elevated his feelings for her into a sacred symbol. Over the next 3 years he wrote La Vita Nuova, weaving his early scattered love poems into a complete narrative. The First Meeting at 9, The Reunion, 18, Visions and Revelation after her death. Santagata stresses that La Vita Nuova is not pure autobiography, but a carefully constructed literary work. Dante introduced heavy symbolism. The number 9 appears repeatedly because the name Beatrice has 9 letters in Latin. Beatrice is shaped into an angel who guides the soul toward elevation. In reality, she was already married to the wealthy merchant Simone dei Badi. Dante's love was likely one-sided admiration, even containing elements of adolescent fantasy. By comparing contemporary documents, Santagata finds clear literary embellishment in Dante's descriptions of Beatrice in La Vita Nuova. More importantly, the symptoms Dante repeatedly mentions, breathlessness, speechlessness, erratic pulse, match perfectly the medieval medical description of lovesickness amor herios. This was considered a genuine physical illness at the time. Sufferers could stop eating, stop sleeping, and even die from unrequited love. Dante skillfully turned this medical concept into literary language, letting readers feel both the sweetness and the destructive power of love. He transformed Beatrice from an ordinary Florentine girl into a theological symbol. This was not only the sublimation of personal feeling, it was his first attempt to use literature to fight against the impermanence of reality. Santagata believes this movement from the physiological to the metaphysical made La Vita Nuova the embryonic form of the Divine Comedy. At the end of La Vita Nuova, Dante describes a vision of a noble lady who tells him Beatrice has ascended to heaven. Santagata interprets this vision as Dante's first attempt to construct a path of salvation through literature. When earthly love cannot be fulfilled, he creates a transcendent love that becomes a ladder to the divine. This narrative logic of moving from loss to sublimation is the embryo of the 3-part structure of the Divine Comedy. For example, he claims the sky over Florence darkened on the day Beatrice died, but no historical record supports this. This shows that very early on Dante learned to use fiction to intensify emotional truth, the most powerful weapon he later used in the Divine Comedy. During this period, Dante began to engage in public affairs. In 1289, he fought as a knight in the Battle of Campaldino against the Ghibellines of Arezzo. The victory brought him brief honor, had let him witness the cruelty of war firsthand. Later in the Inferno, he placed many fallen Oratines in hell, drawing directly on memories from that battle. Santagata's research suggests Dante probably killed enemies with his own hands, which left him both terrified and fascinated by violence. He wrote in verse, "I have seen rivers of blood and souls weeping in the blood." In 1293, Dante married Gemma Donati. Gemma came from a prominent family that had long feuded with Dante's, but the marriage resolved the enmity. The union was pragmatic. Dante needed stability and heirs. He and Gemma had at least 4 children. The eldest son, Jacopo, and Pietro later became commentators on the Divine Comedy. Santagata believes Dante's feelings toward his wife were lukewarm. He ever mentions her in his works, in stark contrast to his passion for Beatrice. But marriage gave him social standing, and he began actively participating in politics. In 1995, Dante formally entered political life. He first joined the Guild of Physicians and Apothecaries. Since there was no guild for poets, he used this one, then was elected as an advisor to the captain of the people. During this time, he wrote many philosophical poems exploring love, friendship, and nobility. Together with Guido Cavalcanti, Cino da Pistoia, and others, he formed the Dolce Stil Novo school, which emphasized love as a path to spiritual elevation rather than carnal desire. Here, Santagata particularly analyzes Dante's political stance. He belonged to the White Guelph faction, a relatively moderate group that favored city autonomy and did not fully submit to the Pope. Dante's ideal was to build an independent, just, and strong Florentine republic. But he soon discovered that real politics was far crueler than poetry. Chapter 3, Peak of Power and Sudden Collapse, 1295 to 1302. By the end of the 13th century, Florence was one of the wealthiest cities in Europe. Banking and textile industries flourished, but internal factional strife grew more and more intense. The Guelph party split into black and white factions. The blacks were pro-pope and took a hard line. The whites were more moderate and inclined toward compromise with the emperor. Dante belonged to the white Guelphs. In 1300, Dante was elected as one of the 6 priors, the highest governing body in Florence. He took part in making policy and adopted a tough stance, supporting the expulsion of extremists. In 1301, Pope Boniface VIII sent the French Prince Charles of Valois to intervene in Florentine affairs. The Black Party seized the opportunity to strike back. At that time, Dante was in Rome on an embassy to the papal court, trying to prevent the intervention, but he failed. Santagata reconstructs this embassy in detail. Dante carried letters from the White Party, pleading with the Pope not to support the blacks. He was coldly received. The Pope even mocked him to his face. "Who do you think you are, a little poet bourgeois?" This humiliation completely destroyed Dante's faith in the papal court. It also led him to place Boniface VIII in the 8th circle of hell, the most famous act of revenge in the entire Divine Comedy. Santagata's research repeatedly emphasizes the details of this humiliation. Dante stood in the Pope's audience hall, surrounded by cardinals in red robes. He was treated like a peasant and publicly insulted. The Pope did not even offer him a seat. He was forced to stand and speak like a servant. When he left Rome, his attendants recorded that his face was ashen, and he remained silent the entire journey. This experience made him abandon any illusion about the moral authority of the papacy. Later, in the eighth circle, the circle of fraud, he reserves a fiery pit for Boniface VIII. Demons thrust him headfirst into the hole, leaving only his burning feet exposed. This visually shocking punishment is on the surface a theological judgment. In reality, is Dante's personal revenge carried out through poetry. On a deeper level, the upside-down position mocks the Pope's perverse rule in life. Through this image, Dante declares, even when justice cannot be achieved on earth, it can be fully realized in the kingdom of poetry. In January 1302, the blacks staged a coup. White leaders were sentenced to exile. Dante's name appeared on the first blacklist. He was accused of corruption, opposition to the Pope, and disturbing the peace. He was fined an enormous sum and sentenced to permanent exile. If he returned to the city, he would be burned at the stake. This sentence completely changed Dante's life. He later wrote, "I was driven from my most beloved Florence, the city I had tried with all my strength to protect." In the first year of exile, he tried to organize an armed white Guelph counterattack. He failed again and again. His friend Guido Cavalcanti died of illness during exile, costing Dante a dear companion. Santagata stresses that this banishment was not merely personal enmity. It was a microcosm of the entire political ecology of Italian city-states. Florence's factional struggle reflected the larger contest between Pope and Emperor, France, and the Holy Roman Empire. Dante went from being a local politician to a homeless exile overnight. Chapter Anger and Reflection in the Early Years of Exile 130 to 1306. In the early years of exile, Dante stayed with the Scaliger family in Verona. He later moved to Lunigiana, Bologna, and other places. He wrote his first public letter condemning the Black Guelph government of Florence as the tyranny of the mob. He also composed on monarchy, arguing that the emperor should stand above the pope and unifiedly to end the chaos of the city-states. Santagata considers on monarchy the peak of Dante's political thought. In it he proposes that humanity needs a single secular authority to maintain peace and that authority must be the Holy Roman Emperor. The Pope should govern souls only, not earthly affairs. This theory was extremely radical, at the time even dangerous, because it directly challenged the Church's temporal power. During this period he wrote his most important work of the phase, The Banquet. The Banquet is an unfinished encyclopedic work written in the Italian vernacular. It aimed to bring philosophy, science, and poetry to ordinary people. He planned 15 treatises, each commenting on one of his own canzoni, but completed only 4. Santagata sees the banquet as Dante's attempt to rebuild his sense of self-worth. Since he had been driven from the political stage, he opened a new battlefield with knowledge and poetry. In the banquet, Dante first systematically sets out his views on language. He argues that the Italian vernacular is fully capable of expressing the highest ideas, no need to rely on Latin. This laid the theoretical foundation for writing the Divine Comedy in the vernacular. He wrote, "The vernacular is natural language, Latin is artificial. What is natural is always truer than what is artificial." This view was highly subversive at the time. In the Middle Ages, Latin was the only legitimate language of the church, universities, and law. The vernacular was seen as crude, low-class folk speech. Dante reversed this completely. He believed that only by writing in the mother tongue could one truly reach ordinary people's souls. He even imagined in the banquet that if everyone could read philosophy, morality, and wisdom, would no longer belong only to monks and scholars, they would become the common possession of all humanity. This idea directly influenced the language chorus of the Divine Comedy. It also helped pave the way for Italian to become a mature literary language. One could say Dante was not only a poet, he was one of the founders of the Italian national language. In 1304, Dante's hopes briefly flared again. Pope Benedict XI tried to reconcile the black and white factions, but he died soon after. The whites failed once more. Dante gradually realized he could not return to Florence by force alone. He began to place his hopes on the Holy Roman Emperor Henry VII. At this stage, Dante's state of mind was extremely complicated. On one hand, he was full of resentment toward Florence, calling it a vile pit. On the other hand, he could never let go of his love for his native city. In his poetry, he wrote, "I wander like a beggar, carrying a broken heart, begging for pity everywhere." Chapter 5, The Emperor's Arrival and the Shattering of Hope. In 1310, Henry VII was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. He announced a campaign to Italy to restore imperial authority. Dante was overjoyed. He wrote 3 passionate letters calling Henry the savior sent by God. He even went to meet Henry in person, begging the emperor to punish the Black Welf government of Florence. Henry did march into Italy. He captured Milan, Genoa, and other cities. In 1312, he laid siege to Florence but failed to take it. Dante watched from afar, his feelings mixed. He both hoped his city would be subdued and feared it would be destroyed. Santagata's research suggests Dante likely wrote parts of the Inferno during Henry's siege of Florence. At that time, he was living in the mountains near Lunigina. Every day he could hear the distant sound of war drums and shouts of battle. He incorporated those sounds into his poetry, making the souls in hell cry out in similar anguish. Those war drums, clashing metal, soldiers' shouts, and screams drilled into his ears day after day. They became the ceaseless background noise of hell in his writing. Santagata believes it was precisely this feeling of being on the edge of war yet powerless to take part that made Dante's hell so real and oppressive. He was not imagining it out of thin air. He was projecting the chaos and terror he lived through into an eternal framework of punishment. In 1313, Henry suddenly fell ill and died at only 52. Dante's hopes were completely crushed. In the Paradiso, he places Henry among the just rulers, yet laments, "You came too soon and left too quickly." This final disillusionment caused a fundamental shift in Dante's thinking. He no longer placed hope in any real political force. Instead, he turned the hope of salvation entirely toward the spiritual realm. He began to devote himself fully to writing the Divine Comedy. Chapter 6, The Birth of the Divine Comedy and the Prophetic Mission 131 for 13-1. The Divine Comedy began to take shape around 1908 and was completed in 1321, more than 10 years in the making. Santagata sees the work as the crystallization of Dante's exile years and his final answer to all his suffering. The Inferno, written around 13, is filled with anger and vengeance. He places all his enemies, including Pope Boniface VIII and the Black Party leaders, in the deepest pits of hell. Santagata points out that the punishments Dante designs in the Inferno often correspond exactly to the sins. For example, the greedy wallow in excrement, traitors are frozen in the ice of Cocytus. This principle of contrapasso reflects both medieval theological ideas of retribution and Dante's personal need for revenge. The Purgatorio shifts to repentance and purification. The tone becomes much gentler. Here Dante admits his own sins for the first time: pride, anger, envy. He places himself in the fifth terrace of purgatory among those who sinned through anger. This rare self-judgment shows Dante's spiritual maturity in the later years of exile. The Paradiso rises to the peak of theology and philosophy. Beatrice reappears, now guiding Dante into paradise. She is no longer the neighborhood girl from reality. She has become the perfect theological symbol, the embodiment of divine wisdom. In the final lines of the Paradiso, Dante writes, "My will and my desire were turned like a wheel revolving uniformly by the love that moves the sun and the other stars." This is the most famous sentence in the entire poem. It marks his transition from personal suffering to the transcendence of cosmic order. Behind this line lies Dante's final reconciliation between free will and divine order. In his last years of exile, he repeatedly asked himself, if humans have free will, why is the world so chaotic? Why do the good suffer while the wicked prosper? Through the ascending spheres of the Paradiso, he gives his answer. True freedom is not doing whatever one wants. True freedom is aligning one's own will perfectly with the love that moves the universe. When the wheel and its axle fit together perfectly, the turning becomes truly free and powerful. This metaphor later influenced countless theologians and philosophers. It also became a key resource for Renaissance humanists in understanding the relationship between man and God. In his final years, Dante moved between Padua, Lucca, Ravenna, and other cities, living on the support of patrons. He served as a diplomatic envoy and wrote political works such as on monarchy and his collected letters. He also wrote on eloquence in the vernacular, defending the literary value of Italian. In 1321, Dante traveled to Venice as Ravenna's envoy to negotiate. On the way, he contracted malaria. He returned to Ravenna and died shortly afterward at the age of 56. His body was buried in the Church of San Francesco in Ravenna. The Florentines repeatedly demanded the return of his remains, but Ravenna always refused. Chapter 7. The Eternal Light of the Exile. After Dante's death, the Divine Comedy spread rapidly and became the cornerstone of Italian literature. His political ideals were never realized, yet they deeply influenced later thinking about the relationship between church and state and national unity. What makes Santagata's biography so valuable is that it shows us a flesh and blood Dante. He was proud, sensitive, stubborn, sometimes narrow-minded, sometimes noble. He was exiled, yet with poetry he built a world far greater than Florence. He failed in politics but triumphed in literature. For ordinary readers, the significance of this book lies not in the details of academic research. Its power is in showing us that great works are often born from immense suffering. Anyone who has been frustrated in reality can find resonance in Dante's story, betrayed, driven out, misunderstood, yet still fighting fate in his own way. Today, in our fast-changing era, when we face workplace exclusion, shattered ideals, and alienation from our roots, Dante's experience remains like a mirror. He tells us, failure is not the end. Pain can be transformed into creative force. As long as you turn the fire inside you toward building rather than destroying, it is possible to raise an eternal city from the ruins. That may be the ultimate purpose of Santagata's biography, to help 21st century readers find the courage to face their own destinies in Dante's defeats and victories. When modern people face career setbacks, broken relationships, or dreams left on hold, Dante's story is bitter, but healing medicine. It reminds us that real strength is not never being wounded, it is growing new branches from the wounds. He spent 13 years in exile and wrote a work that changed the history of European literature. We may not need to write an epic, but we can at least learn to turn pain into fuel for moving forward, rather than letting it become the rock that crushes us. When we reread the Divine Comedy today, the flames of hell and the light of paradise both come from the blazing fire inside a man who was sentenced to be burned by his own city. That fire destroyed his political career, but it illuminated the entire night sky of human literature. That is the true life of Dante, a failed politician, a successful prophet, an eternal exile, and an everlasting poet.